Hey everyone, Chris here. So I have just learned minutes ago that a new interview with Jeremy Crawford has come out regarding the next playtest on 1D&D. This is called Expert Classes, and apparently the PDF comes out tomorrow. But there is an interview where he'll be doing some previews that is out right now. I will link it in the video description down below. But I wanted to do a reaction video like I did with the last one. Like I said, as 1D&D, the playtests come out, I just want to be on top of that stuff because this is really shaping our game. So as I promised you, I would be doing constant content as this stuff comes out. So we're going to react to this video, and then tomorrow I'm going to dive into the playtest and hopefully get a video out to you as soon as possible after that. So let's get started on this interview, and I will give you my reactions as we go through it.
We have a brand new Unearthed Arcana. We have classes, subclasses, we have feats, conditions, we have new rules having to do with skill checks and attack rolls, as well as how a critical hit functions. So let's just...
Okay, well, this is earlier than I expected to jump in. However, there are some surprising things on the things that Jeff has just listed out. By far the most surprising is to hear about critical hits, because we know that the last playtest, did some serious changes to critical hits that were not popular at all. So I'm wondering if they've changed their mind already on that. That would be a very quick turnaround. I also noticed he mentioned skill checks, and I wonder if that has something to do with the natural 1s and natural 20s on skill checks, being an auto success and an auto failure. Again, those were not overly popular, so I'm curious whether that has also been changed, or if there's some new rules they've been adding.
Just delve in right now and have an overview of all of that.
This Unearthed Arcana is filled with things I can't wait for people to playtest. We're playing testing them internally here at Wizards, and leading the pack in this playtest for the classes are the Ranger, the Bard, and the Rogue. People are going to see in the next few months all of the classes from the 2014 Player's Handbook are going to appear in Unearthed Arcana so that people can read them, give feedback, playtest them. Following after that, you're going to see a series of Unearthed Arcanas that also unveil new versions of subclasses, as well as some brand new subclasses for those classes. The total number of subclasses when all is said and done, 48. So we have a lot of fun things ahead of us.
Okay. Okay, so I wondered what they meant by expert classes. Now I know. So it sounds like the Bard, the Ranger, and the Rogue are considered expert classes. I assume because they're skill-based classes. All three of them are just, even in our current rule set, the ones that get additional skill proficiencies starting at first level. And the fact that they use expert, I can't help but notice that, of course, rogues get expertise in our current edition. Bards get expertise in our current edition. And Rangers didn't get expertise until Tasha's, but in Tasha's there was an optional class feature that gave them expertise as well. So they were the three classes that could get expertise. They're actually not the only way you can get expertise, but the only three base classes, I think, that provide it. I could be wrong on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's if memory serves. Now, he says there are 48 subclasses, and it sounds like they won't be in, or even the subclasses necessarily for these classes might not be in this Unearthed Arcana, which is surprising. I kind of figured that they would be releasing subclasses along with the classes, but it sounds like we're going to get the base classes first, and then we will get the subclasses. So 48, I'm sure, is more than we currently have. The way he was talking, obviously it's more. I'm just trying to think. I know we have a lot of cleric subclasses right in the Player's Handbook, and we have a fair number of wizard subclasses. You know, I don't know how much less it is than 48. I think I'm going to cut here because I want to actually look this up. All right, so we have 2 barbarians, 2 bards, 7 clerics, so we're up to 11. 2 druids, so we're up to 13. 3 fighters, so that's 16. 3 monks, so that's 19. 3 paladins, so that's 22. 2 rangers, that's 24. 3 rogues, so that's 27. 2 sorcerers, that's 29. 3 warlocks, that's 32. And 8 wizards, so that's actually 40 already. So our current player's handbook has 40 subclasses, so 48 is an increase. I'm not sure it's as big as an increase as he kind of was indicating there. He seems so excited. 48. Well, it's 8 more. That's 20% more.
To try out. But today, we're focused on our friends, the Bard, the Ranger, and the Rogue, along with, as you mentioned, a bunch of feats, because each of these classes, like all of the classes in the game, has the option at certain levels of taking feats, including the new ability score improvement feat, which many fans rightly predicted is what was going to be coming. And
I did not predict that, and I did not know that a bunch of fans had predicted that ability score increases were now going to be feats. I guess it really doesn't matter, right? Whether you get an ability score increase and you can trade it for a feat, or whether ability score increase is just a feat. I mean, tomato, tomato, right?
sure enough, when you reach any of the levels that in the past where you would have gotten the ability score improvement feature, now you have the option of taking the ability score improvement feat, does exactly the same thing as the ability score improvement feature in the 2014 Player's Handbook, or you can take another feat of your choice. If your group is deciding to go beyond the ability score improvement feat and the first level feat that you're getting from your background in the previous Unearthed Arcana.
Now that is interesting. Okay, so here's what's not surprising to anyone is we all kind of understood after the first playtest that I guess feats aren't an optional thing anymore. He just suggested that you might have DMs that limit you to first level feats and ability score increase feats, which would suggest to me that all feats other than first level are going to be optional feats. They're all going to be an option, just like feats are options now. That is a bit of a shock because I really thought, based on our last Unearthed Arcana, that they had thrown away the idea that feats would be optional. But he just said there, it was pretty clear to me, he said, if your DM decides to use them. So there you go. And like I said, the ability score increases being feats is nothing. It really means no difference at all. So yeah, it doesn't sound like feats are going to be non-optional after all, except for, the first level feats and the ability score increase feats.
This UA also includes the Arcane, Divine, and Primal spell lists all the way up to level 9, and it includes a rules glossary that is filled with even more treasures than the previous one. And here I want to pause a little bit and talk about how do you use these Unearthed Arcanas together? Because now that we have 2 out as a part of the 1 D&D playtest, we would love for people to play using material from multiple 1 D&D Unearthed Arcanas. The one main thing to keep in mind as people playtest is that the rules glossary of each UA supersedes the rules glossaries of any previous 1 D&D UAs. So we'd love for you to take the character origin options from the previous UA, combine them with the classes and feats in this UA.
Okay, so I'm certain what he's talking about here because at the beginning of the video, we heard that there were going to be new rules for skill rolls. There were going to be new rules for critical hits. That tells me that they have changed their minds on some of the rules from the original playtest already. And the survey for that playtest isn't even closed yet. And they have already decided to change some stuff. And so what they're saying is that, and I had wondered this because, if critical hits were not popular and they decided to change it, are we just stuck with it on the playtest, like right until 2024? Sounds like they will be correcting as they go. So my guess is that critical hits at least have changed, or they've gotten rid of them altogether. Like they've gotten rid of the playtest version of them altogether. And the same thing goes with skill checks, or at least the natural 1s and natural 20s. We'll see. But at least it's either going to be scaled down or gone altogether.
Use only the rules glossary from the new Unearthed Arcana.
Right.
Because over the course of the next year and a half, we're going to try out different versions of core rules and then see what people think of those different versions. A great example of this is how we're handling critical hits.
Yes.
So you and I, in our video last time, talked about the fact that the previous Unearthed Arcana had a rule that we knew was very experimental,
Right.
and had a good chance of not being what the community was going to cheer for, but we were interested in seeing what do people think, because there were some angles to that rule that we were fascinated in seeing how can this serve the game. We've already seen some of the responses, and you're going to see this time that for the current version of the playtest, we are using the critical hit rule as it exists in the 2014 Player's Handbook. So again, make sure if you're playtesting and everyone else is playtesting.
I just wanted to make sure that he didn't have anything else to say there. They've dumped the whole thing. So he's talked about there were all these different angles, which there were. There was spells not critical hitting. There was only doubling the weapon damage dice. It's all gone. And, he talked a little bit about trying on different playtests, different angles of it. And then he's saying, and on critical hits, we're just using the old Player's Handbook. So there you go. They're not trying new angles anymore. They've dumped the critical hit rule. I'm sure a lot of you are thrilled to hear that. And maybe they will try something else with critical hits in future playtests. They could. But as of this coming playtest, the critical hit playtest completely gone. They have gotten rid of it entirely.
Read the new rules glossary, where you'll also see that we are experimenting with different rules this time around for the D20 test. This time we don't have the universal rule of a 20 always succeeding and a 1 always failing. Instead, we are playing around with some other approaches. Although there, you're also going to find a familiar friend in that we're largely using the 2014 version of the rule, with the catch that this time we're testing rolling a 1 on a d20, giving you inspiration.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, so I've already had multiple conversations with many of you, as well as online and with other D&D creators, where we all kind of talked about maybe they should just have the inspiration when you roll a 1. And sounds like maybe they've heard or they have the same idea. So the 20 inspiration is gone, 1 has replaced it. And for all of you who didn't want the natural 20s and natural 1s for skill checks, they're gone. Now, I would have to listen to him again. I'm actually going to back him up here for a bit, because I wanted to hear whether he talked about tests in general or just ability checks, because I'm wondering if saving throws have also been switched, like the natural 1 and natural 20. So let me just back this up just a bit. I want to hear it one more time.
This time around for the D20 test, this time we don't have the universal rule of a 20 always succeeding and a 1 always failing.
So he is including saving throws and ability checks there. So the 1 and 20 rule is gone.
Because we basically have 3 different modes we are looking at for getting inspiration in play. Last time we asked everyone to try out getting it when you roll a 20. This time we're asking you to try it out when you roll a 1. We also, in the previous Unearthed Arcana, had another mode in the human of getting inspiration when you finish a long rest. We've actually considered having that as a potential rule for everybody, but right now we want to try out the roll a 1 rule for everybody, and then humans have the special feature of getting it at the end of a long rest.
Right.
Now, speaking of humans and the other content in the previous Unearthed Arcana, The survey for that UA is still open, and the response has been tremendous. As of today, over 40,000 people have completed the survey. We'll see how many more people have completed it by the time the survey closes next week. We are then going to go into our...
To some degree, I wonder what's the point of keeping this survey open at this point? Because it sounds like they've already made a number of decisions based on their feedback. So the natural 1 and natural 20 thing, it's gone. The critical hit changes, they're gone. The roll inspiration or get inspiration when you roll a 20 has been changed to a 1. I guess, there's obviously the more static stuff of the racial stuff. If you haven't filled out the survey, you should. But it sounds like they've actually made a lot of decisions based on the feedback they've already gotten.
Our investigation of what has everyone said about the different options that were in that UA. We will look at all of the satisfaction scores. And then in a future video, you and I will get together and we'll talk about what did people say. And then at a future point in this journey we're on together, we'll present a new version of that Unearthed Arcana incorporating people's feedback. That's going to be the cycle.
Okay, so that's another interesting thing. So I kind of had the impression originally that, they would do an Unearthed Arcana on races. They do an Unearthed Arcana on probably classes and feats and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, it'll be a little bit of a different format than I thought it might have been. But the big thing is that he's saying we haven't seen the last Unearthed Arcana on races. Not only are you going to see your feedback come into play in terms of the racial playtest you just saw, but there will be a next version of that playtest, and then you will get, I assume, another chance to say what you think of the revisions that are based on our feedback. So that is really interesting. A very refined process to that, and kind of just graduating from playtest to playtest of the same material. So yeah, that's really interesting. And again, I didn't expect that. That's cool.
That we're all in together during this long playtest. Just like we did in D&D Next, we're going to present something.
Yep.
We're going to get the feedback back. We'll analyze it. We'll do a new version incorporating feedback, and then we'll get feedback on that new version until, in a few years' time, the game coalesces into the new core books.
We're also going to have several videos all about this Unearthed Arcana that will go a little bit more in depth. It is important to remember, we have had a record-breaking amount of people download the playtest. We are very excited, and if you're watching this video, please remember, we appreciate all the comments on YouTube and other social networks, but what will really help us in the end is if you download the playtest and then take the survey that comes out and leave your feedback. That is how you help us sculpt the future of D&D together.
Yeah, filling out that survey is the best way to have an impact on where this is heading. Now, in addition to responding to what we see there, we're also going to continue to do experiments. So I mentioned we are dealing with the D20 test and getting inspiration differently this time. That's just simply our design process proceeding. That's not even in response to the feedback yet because the survey is still open. So people are going to get to see not only...
Well, I stand corrected. He is saying that the reason why they've gotten rid of this stuff is because they were already planning to do so and it had nothing to do with the feedback. What I don't understand then is why have critical hits be the same as they are in the player's handbook in this version? If it was a case of what are we going to do about critical hits? There's a bunch of things we want to try. Maybe we'll try monsters not being able to critical hit. Maybe we'll try only doubling weapon damage dice. Maybe we'll try spells not critical hitting. It seems really weird to me that they would, throw all that in the first playtest. And in the second playtest, they'd say, don't use that anymore. Rather than, say, oh, well, that was version 1 of our altered critical hit system. Here's version 2 of our altered critical hit system where you triple the damage dice. Let's try that out. But instead they're saying, no, just use your player's handbook. Well, then they're not playtesting anything. So I'm not sure I understand.
Only new versions of things that we've heard from the community that they would like to see. You're also going to see new versions of things based on our own internal playtesting and also just different versions of mechanics we want to try out. This is a playtest, and part of that is testing out sometimes multiple versions of things to see which one on its own resonates most for all of us as DMs and players.
You know what I'm thinking? As he's talking, I'm it sounds like he's talking about inspiration. First, we'll try if you roll a 20, you get it, see what people think. Then we'll try if you roll a 1, you'll get it, see what people think. Then maybe we'll try on the next playtest. We'll see everybody gets it on a long rest, and we'll see what people think of that. So I think that's what he's talking about. I honestly think critical hits, they've just given up for now. Because there's just no reason. Again, I'm stuck on this, but there is no reason for them to say use your old player's handbook for critical hits if they had new ideas they wanted to try.
Of this game, and then even further, which options sync up well with the other pieces of the game? Because D&D is a game with hundreds, if not thousands, of moving parts, and we want to make sure that if anything shifts, things are really running together in a way that's going to make people feel in the end, this game is exactly what I want it to be. So this time around, what we're asking people to look at are these classes, which also are framed in a way that is new for the current version of the game.
Let's go ahead and dig into the classes then. So we've got 3 of the classes here, and then we've got subclasses attached. So tell me about what's changed.
So one of the first things is that framing that is going to be new for people. And that is that these 3 classes are presented as experts. So people are going to see in this Unearthed Arcana that the 12 classes of the Player's Handbook, as well as the Artificer, who, while not in the Player's Handbook, gets mentioned in this UA, each of these classes is now a part of a group in this playtest. The Ranger, the Rogue, and the Bard are part of what's currently called the Expert group. So hence the name of this Unearthed Arcana, the Expert classes. In future Unearthed Arcanas, you're going to see the other class groups featured, but we wanted to start with the experts. Now, this new concept of class group, new for the current version of the game, is something that has appeared in D&D's history at various times, going all the way back to even the second edition Player's Handbook grouped.
What he's talking about there is, so in the second edition Player's Handbook, there were groupings like Rogue was a grouping, and then within Rogue you had Thief or Bard. And then you had Warrior, and within Warrior you had like Paladin, Fighter, or Ranger. So that's what he's referring to. Now, I would imagine the reason for grouping classes and grouping spells would be very much the same. And that is, there has been problems with the release of new products where they cannot reference anything but the Player's Handbook. So, you have a subclass with bonus spells, and this spell from Xanathar's would have really fit on this subclass, or this spell from Tasha's would have really fit on this subclass, but you can't put it on there because then you're requiring the person who bought this book to also buy other supplemental books. So they only reference the Player's Handbook. The advantage of doing it this way is that you could add additional spells, and then you could say, okay, but this feature allows you to pick any spell from the primal group. And then you can add additional spells in, and they're from the primal group, right? So then if you have that supplement, you could use them. And I could see that being a case with the classes as well. So you could have a feat that says this feat can only be taken by the expert group. And then you could have an additional class added in another supplement. Like we had that with the artificer, right? So you could have a new class. So, call it what you want, but some kind of expert class that specializes in skills. And then you could say, well, this fits into the expert group. And then any feat that expert classes could qualify for, they could qualify for as well. So if you think about how that might fit something like the Magic Initiate feat, if you remember, the Magic Initiate feat came out, and then if you wanted to take Artificer spells, there was no way to do it. They had to create a new feat for it. This would kind of be a workaround and allow you to have some of your base stuff just expand with your supplemental material.
Classes in a similar way. The big question is here, what do these groups mean? The main thing that they do for us is provide a way to deliver groups of classes certain elements of the game collectively. So you're going to see in this very Unearthed Arcana, some of the feats, for instance, have certain class groups as prerequisites. You'll see a feat where it says you maybe need to be a member of the expert or the warrior group to take this feat. What that does is it allows us to serve up options to multiple classes simultaneously, and also serve classes like the Artificer that might not be in the same book as the 12 classes that are in the...
Okay, so he's basically going to say the exact same thing I did, different words. He probably explained it better than I did.
Player's Handbook, because since we indicate here in this UA that the Artificer counts as an expert, that means anything that members of that group qualify for, the Artificer qualifies for. And if we were ever to make a new class and put it into one of these groups, then suddenly it is able to tap into the shared tech of that group. You're going to see this in the next year or so, where you'll see magic items that, rather than having a particular class or a particular feature as a prereq, we'll have one of these groups or multiple groups as a prerequisite.
I guess one of the things that definitely tells us is there will be Unearthed Arcana for Dungeon Master's Guide, assuming magic items are actually going in the Dungeon Master's Guide, not in the Player's Handbook this time around. And we will see redesign of the magic items in the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is great, because boy, what a mess. So hopefully they do a better job this time.
You're also going to see that in many cases, while the classes have retained their distinctiveness and their delightful asymmetry, where they work in the ways that are most appropriate for those individual classes, you're going to see more common pieces. So one example of that in this current Unearthed Arcana is all three of the expert classes have the expertise feature. The expertise feature is the signature feature of experts. And so that means even the ranger now has it. The bard and the rogue already had it in the 2014 Player's Handbook.
Yeah, so rangers, like I said at the beginning of the video, rangers do have expertise, but it required an optional class feature in Tasha's. So if you were just using the Player's Handbook, rangers didn't have expertise. So that obviously is changing. That is not a surprise at all. I've got to imagine that the Tasha's optional class features, for the most part, are going to be the preferred class features we're going to see in the new playtests, if it's not redesigned yet again.
Well, now the ranger gets it too, because one of the aspects of the ranger's class fantasy is being the best in a group, particularly at things like survival, stealth, so that the ranger can be fantastic at what is iconic for them. Right. And expertise is one of the ways that we do that. Another thing that the experts all have in common is that they are polymaths. They like to have pieces within their classes that are reminiscent of things in other groups. So it is by design that all three of the experts have components within them that are reminiscent of things that you might see in the warrior group, the mage group, the priest group, but here mixed together in a way that is unique.
Well, we know what the other groups are. Warrior, priest, mage, expert.
To each of the expert classes. Now we can dive in to each of the classes individually and their subclasses, but that overview I think is exciting because it shows that we're not only thinking now of the classes as individuals and also then as a whole family, but then also in these subgroups, and we can leverage these groups in a variety of ways that I think are going to be really fun, not only in terms of the options that we'll be able to give people, but even when it comes to party building. Something we note in this current article is that when you're building a party now, if you want to create sort of a classic balanced D&D party, one way you can do that is make sure you have a member in your group from each of the class groups. Also, something that people are going to see in both the Ranger and the Bard in this Unearthed Arcana is a list of suggested prepared spells. One thing that we have seen over the last 8 years very clearly is that sometimes playing a spellcaster can be a little daunting.
Right.
And so what we've done to make it a bit easier to ease into playing a spellcasting class that you've never played before is we provide from level 1 all the way up to level 20 a set of suggested prepared spells for the class. So again, you're going to see that here in the Bard. You're going to see it.
I don't have a lot of confidence they're going to pick the best spells, so you're going to have to stick with me on that one.
In the Ranger, and in future Unearthed Arcanas, when we get to other spellcasting classes, you're going to see it in them as well, where we take some of the most iconic spell options and put them on a list so that, again, whether you're a new player or a veteran who may be just like, I don't feel like making a choice, please, D&D book, tell me, you can go to that class, look at the suggested list of prepared spells, and just start with that. You still have, of course, the option every time you finish a long rest to change that list, but it gives you a nice starting point so that you maybe don't have to do quite as much homework.
Now, did he let something slip there? Because he said at the end of a long rest, you always have the chance to change your prepared or your list of spells. Does that include the Ranger? Because it didn't before. Does that include the Bard? Because it didn't before. In fact, both classes in this playtest originally could not change their spells unless they leveled up. So it'll be very interesting to see, are all classes now, if you're casting spells, going to be able to change their spells after every long rest? If what he said there was true, the answer to that is yes. So that's a major slip if that's the case.
When you decide to dive into a spellcasting class that's new for you.
So ritual spellcasting has changed, or rather people have more access to it now?
Yes. So one of the many goodies in the rules glossary is the simple but important note that we are playtesting currently that basically if you can cast a spell and it has the ritual tag, you have the option of casting it as a ritual. In the past...
That's good. That's really good. So now they'll have to... I wonder what they'll do with book... I'm thinking of the Warlock Invocation... Book of Ancient Secrets, I think it is, lets you cast rituals. So they could still have that because it would allow you to cast rituals that weren't on your class list. So it still might be a good invocation.
A character had to have a feature that specifically unlocked rituals for them. And we've decided to experiment instead with just the ability of, again, if you can cast the spell and it has the ritual tag, you have the option of casting it as a ritual and just have that turned on for spellcasters of all sorts.
And all the classes eventually get we didn't touch upon this, also can get access to epic feats or epic boons.
That is right. Now, every class, what was previously their 20th level feature,
Right.
they now get at 18th level. And instead, now at 20th level, those epic boons that are in the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, you now get one when you hit 20th level.
Okay. Well, that's big news. So I don't know if all of you are familiar with epic boons, because a lot of stuff in the Dungeon Master's Guide, I find a lot of players, they just never need it, so they don't know it exists. But there is a list of epic boons, and the idea of those would be when your character got to level 20, of course, you can't level up anymore. So what the DM could do is they could give you these epic boons instead of a level up, kind of as a reward. And the one thing I remember about epic boons is they are not balanced against each other at all. There are some that are just way better than others. Some are really powerful, and some of them aren't very good at all. So I wonder, I hope if they're going to do that they're going to rebalance those, because they need rebalanced if that's what they're going to do. The other thing I note that he said that basically everything that classes got before at 20th level, they'll get at 18th level. What I really wonder is that going to be the same as it was? Like, is my barbarian going to get a +4 strength and constitution at level 18 now? Well, my thief gets, or my rogue gets, some little incidental feature. Good question. I guess we will find out.
Now, we have a suggested one for each class, but when you hit 20th level, you now get to pick. And those epic boons have been reimagined as feats, and many of them are also available in this Unearthed Arcana.
That's awesome.
Okay, so that's it. So it sounds to me like we're going to see rewritten epic boons, which is probably a great thing. This is not something I had very mixed feelings about epic boons in the Dungeon Master's Guide because they were so poorly balanced against each other. So hopefully they do a better job this time around. So I'll be excited to see those, and I will be definitely downloading this tomorrow, reading through it thoroughly, and then I will be doing a video where I go over it for all of you. And I will either have it out tomorrow. That might be tight. It might not be until the day after tomorrow. But I'll get it out to you as soon as I can. And otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you very soon.